Hello and welcome to a pre-Christmas video looking at the release of the Savage Worlds Fantasy Skirmish Setting Codex. So this new book is based upon the Savage Worlds role-playing game, which you would almost certainly know of. And what it does is the first two releases in this line, Savage Worlds Fantasy Skirmish and Supplemental, they bring the Savage Worlds rules into, they turn them into war games rules. So still the same rules, still the same concepts, but used for war games rather than role-playing. With, of course, the huge benefit that you can mix and match those as you wish. And we've already published one fantasy campaign where the players are fantasy adventurers and they go through dungeons and wildernesses, etc., etc. And then mixed in there are a couple of big battles that are played out using wargame rules. And they've done very well, but they only really focus on fantasy. They don't really focus on any other setting. And as I said, Savage Worlds can do all sorts of settings. So the new book, the Setting Codex, addresses that issue and offers rules and tips and tools to allow you to use those two books with a sci-fi setting, a modernist setting, or a historical setting. And there are three sections in the Setting Codex. The first of those is the historical section. So we've got rules there for everything from prehistory all the way up really to Napoleonic, black powder, pre-World War One. And in many ways, that's more or less a fantasy setting, just without the magic. So, for example, I've got some painted miniatures here these are from 3D Breed. The colour on this camera doesn't look quite right, not as bright as they're looking to me, but there we have some Norman knights. We've got some Saxon spearmen, if I can get them in the camera. My painting's not amazing, but I'm not bothered, they look good to me. And we've got some Norman spearmen there, and I quite like them, they look really good. But it's also given me the opportunity, as well as painting all the miniatures for it, to prepare some really rather nice terrain. Oh, drop it, from printable scenery, which here we have a rather nice thatched cottage, and I really do like this one. Here we have a fortress 3D printed where each of the sections can lift off to allow you to get into the inside, and so on. So an Anglo-Norman war game is not vastly different from fantasy, except that rather than having dwarves versus goblins or elves versus undead, you've got Normans versus Saxons. You've still got swords and shields and armour and so on. But of course, the difference you've got is you haven't got magic in a historical setting. So we needed to put in some rules to address the balancing issue, because of course some armies are going to have really good equipment and some are going to have really rubbish equipment. And if you just left it as it was, then everyone's just going to go for good equipment because, hey. So there needs to be a balancing mechanism there. And so we've got supply chains. You can have your own blacksmiths or your own cobblers, and you've got so that the boots are better so that the troops can march further. And basically these are supply chains that enable you to keep going in certain situations, give you certain tactical advantages. The second section is the modern section, and this is really World War One, World War Two, and obviously now you start having vehicles, and again, painting opportunity, nice Tiger tank there, and again some 3D Breed figures here, which are British infantry. And as for terrain, again, we've got something of slightly different. So we've got, again, from printable scenery, we've got a trench there, one end of it at least, and we've got a ruined building that has been obviously hit by a shell and burnt out and collapsed. And that gives you a slightly different terrain to the earlier ones. And obviously you've then got different issues, because whether you've got good boots or not is less important in say the Second World War or even a modern battle than it would be in much earlier times. So now your support options that balance the equipment are various options that you can call in. So you buy these before the battle. with the points you have left over if you have inferior equipment. And you can buy these and deploy them as and when you need them. So you might buy a strafing run, a tactical bombing run, and a heavy artillery. So the strafing run is attack planes fly down a straight corridor that you define on the map, and it attacks everything within that corridor. The tactical bombing run, you can put a couple of large blast templates down, and the heavy artillery, you put a large blast template and then another one a certain distance, but you need a wild card within a certain distance in order to call that in, and so on. So you've got different tactical options. And obviously things like tanks and jeeps and bikes have a lot more impact, have a lot of impact in a modern battle. And when we move to the third section, which is the sci-fi battles, that becomes even more pronounced, because now you've got things like hover tanks, and you've got really heavy artillery, and you've got aliens, and you've got potentially psionics, and so on and so forth. So for the terrain, I went for printable scenery, something called the New Eden range, which could be used, I suppose, for jungle, lizard man type battles or desert, but also look really good as alien ruins. And there's a rather impressive alien sphinx that I quite like. It's not the best picture, but it'll do. And for the figures, we've got, again, I've had quite a lot of fun painting these. So we've got some, just knocked them all over, some armoured sort of marine type characters. We've got a rather nice hover bike, and they're from Bright Minis, and we've got a rather good human sort of tactical troops. And again, SciFi takes that sort of support option just several steps further. So you've still got things like a strafing run or tactical bombing run if you want it, because it's just spaceships rather than aeroplanes or helicopters doing it. But you've also got the option of things like emergency teleport, so you can emergency teleport troops across field. You've got dropship recovery. So if you've got a really injured unit, you can scoop it off, take it away, apply immediate healing and after battle healing as well. So if you've got a really, really valuable unit you don't want to lose, you can scoop it out harm's way. You've got dropships to deploy troops suddenly in the middle of battle. You've got emergency force shields to protect troops from damage, and so on. And so we've got all of these rules, all of these different tools in there, and we've also got some sample army lists. There's a couple of historical, a couple of modern, a couple of sci-fi, to give you an idea of how these are built. Plenty of examples, plenty of photos as before. So there will be a print issue in the new year. As soon as the print's open, I will send off the print files and get those proofed and returned. And if you do buy it now as a PDF, you will get a discount code then for money off the print version, so you don't lose out in the long run. And these three books together provide a rounded system where you can basically play war games in just about any non-fantasy setting, or indeed fantasy setting or non-fantasy setting, so any setting at all. In fact, if you're using Savage Worlds for it, you can easily adapt almost any published setting or homebrew setting to that. And if you just want to use it as a war game, it is a really, really, really fast and intuitive way to run tabletop battles. So thank you very much. I hope you have a good Christmas and New Year, and there'll be plenty more coming next year.